Well, hello and good morning. Welcome to Sunday Morning Coffee with Dr. Childress. I have my owl cup today, so I'm kind of feeling whimsical. So today I want to be talking about the contingent visitation schedule. This is something I developed about 5 years ago. It's a strategic family systems intervention, a strategic behavioral family systems intervention that will resolve the pathology in the family. It's a treatment oriented approach that I applied my knowledge of strategic family systems therapy and applied behavioral analysis, functional behavioral analysis, behavioral psychology, and came up with a treatment model. One of the features about what I'm doing is I'm highly critical of the mental health services in the family courts because they are simply awful. It's because forensic psychology, you've been given over to them, and the standards of practice in that field are absolutely at the bottom. But you're separated out from the rest of clinical psychology and knowledge because it's too dangerous for them to work in the family courts. It's too dangerous to their license. So you're basically in an isolated little cell and you're given the worst imaginable psychologist. They conducted an experiment on you called forensic custody evaluations. And there's just a number of problems with what's going on in the mental health system in the family courts that needs a more focused attention for resolution. But in the meantime, I'm a clinical psychologist. So I'm an actual psychologist from the outside. I'm a trauma psychologist out of foster care and ADHD, and worked in a lot of different places other than the family courts, school system, those juvenile justice. And so I'm applied the knowledge as a clinical psychologist to the pathology in the family courts. It's not enough that I simply criticize what's happening. We also need to have solutions to that. So I've come up with the solutions. I say, here are things that I would recommend you do. I have the assessment protocol. If you're looking for an assessment protocol, I've written up a little booklet on that. If you're looking for an intervention, I've got the contingent visitation schedule. If you're looking for diagnosis, I've got the diagnostic checklist. I've got outcome measure, the parent-child relationship rating scale. So I've provided all the solutions. I've told you what the diagnosis is: shared delusional disorder, factitious attachment pathology imposed on the child psychological abuse. I've laid it all out, the family systems, cross-generational code. So I've described the pathology in detail and foundations. I've given you all the clinical tools you need to solve it. What this points out, though, is you don't have any clinical psychologists in the family courts to implement any of the clinical interventions because they are just at the rock bottom. But these interventions are available. And so today I'm going to talk about the contingent visitation schedule because I'm pretty convinced this will resolve the pathology in the family if correctly implemented by the mental health people. And they should be able to do it. It's applied behavioral analysis, basically. So if they know behavioral psychology, they should be able to implement a contingent visitation schedule. Um, so that's the booklet. It's up on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon. I priced all my booklets as low as Amazon would let me price them because they want to make some money. Uh, but it's basically, I developed it so that parents can provide it to the court, provide it to their therapist, to provide it to everybody, and put something in their hands. And that tells them both what the pathology is to a degree and how to solve it. And say, yeah, I'd like one of these, please. The problem you're going to run into, though, is you're not going to find anybody in the mental health field who can implement this. But as soon as you do, it's available. So basically, uh, what the contingent visitation schedule is, it's a strategic behavioral family systems intervention. So one of the domains, and the primary domain that it's developed from, is called strategic family systems therapy. It's an advanced form of psychotherapy. family therapy. It's Chloe Madanis and Jay Haley are the founders of the strategic school of family systems therapy. Salvador Minuchin founded the structural family school of family systems therapy, and they're both taking a look at family systems in slightly different ways. All three of them, Chloe Madanis, Jay Haley, and Salvador Minuchin, worked at the same clinic in Philadelphia as they were coming up with family systems therapy and the models. And so they were all working, collaborating together. And Jay Haley, Chloe Madanis, who were married, kind of developed their approach, and Salvador Minuchin developed his approach. And then we have Bowen in there as well as family systems and others. And but the central element of strategic family systems therapy is that the symptom confers power. And that's this is a very important. And then we in families in strategic family systems, we then develop an intervention, a prescriptive intervention. We just tell people do this, and that if they do what we tell them to do, it's going to alter the power dynamic in the family, and the symptoms just simply going to drop away. The To take a second to talk about this, this is an important concept. The symptom confers power within the family. The most powerful person in the family is the person with the symptoms. So let's take an example of somebody with an anxiety disorder, it's an anxiety symptom. Everybody in the family has to adjust to that person's, I can't do that, I can't do this, I can't. And so everybody has to adjust because the symptom is giving them power. A depressed person, oh, I can't get out of bed, and now we're having to do all sorts of things, and they are controlling us through the symptom. That doesn't mean they are artificially creating the symptom. That simply means that's part of the dynamic process that occurs, is that symptoms will develop because they serve power dynamics. And in a lot, if you don't get a handle on it, you can get a very symptomatic family where each family member has their own symptom in order to compensate for the power that the other person's symptom gives to them. And so we can get all sorts of symptomatic families. So that was a valuable understanding that Chloe Madanis and Jay Haley developed about how the within family systems symptoms confer power. Then their idea based on that was to once you analyze how that symptom is conferring power, how it's serving to do that, then you create some sort of intervention. You tell them to do something, a prescriptive intervention, that if they do it, it will change how that symptom confers power. And the moment you take away its power function, it'll simply drop away. It's no longer serving any useful function. And poof, it just vanishes. And the client doesn't even need to know why it works or anything. If you just do it, it will take the symptom away. So it's very elegant, but it's that creating the prescriptive intervention that's the craft part. That's where the skill of the family systems therapist comes in, is recognizing what the power function is and then crafting that prescriptive intervention. So that's what I did for you. I crafted the intervention from a strategic family systems model about if you do the contingent visitation schedule, the symptoms will resolve. Okay. And I can explain all about why and everything, but you don't even need to know why. You just need to do it and it will drop away the symptoms. But I'll explain why. That's what I'm doing today. So that's the strategic family therapy component of the contingent visitation schedule. There's also a behavioral component that's like equally as solidly grounded, and that's also operating within the system. And it's just classic behavior therapy. It's called a functional behavioral analysis, FBA. It's functional behavioral analysis is based in applied behavioral analysis. So an applied behavioral analysis, it's like what you do with the kids with autism and stuff. That's applied behavioral analysis. Stimulus, response, cues, rewards. It's basically built on a structure of antecedent behavior and consequence. So there's three, there's a cue for the behavior, then the behavior that's elicited, and then the reward or the punishment that follows the behavior. What functional behavioral analysis does, it takes that basic unit of cue, antecedent, behavior, and consequence, reward or punishment, takes that basic unit and adds a piece. It adds the function of the behavior. And so, what function does it serve? And then I like functional behavioral because then you look, and once you identify the function of the behavior, you develop an intervention that makes that behavior ineffective, irrelevant, or inefficient in serving that function. Okay, so you interrupt the ability of the behavior to serve its function, and the moment you make that behavior irrelevant or ineffective in serving its function, it will drop away. So the two strategic family systems about power and behavior therapy about the function kind of are saying the same thing. They're just kind of approaching it from their own models. Well, so what you'll see in the strategic family systems or the contingent visitation schedule is you'll see that I've kind of blended those two. And so for all outward appearances, it's going to look like a behavior program. So if you look at star charts, and you get a star for your good behavior that day, and if you get 5 stars, you get a reward. That kind of behavior program that's used in schools all the time and with parents all the time, star charts, token economies, that's what it's going to look like on the surface. And that's what it is. It's a behavior program, and that's exactly. And so it applies all the principles of applied behavioral analysis, functional behavioral analysis. But really, where the power is coming from is on the strategic family systems component. It's changing how the symptom is conferring power, and it's taking away the rewards from the pathological parent, the allied parent. It's taking away their rewards for creating the behavior, the pathology in the child. It's no longer working. In fact, it's doing just the opposite of what they want it to do, and it just so it's taking away their motivation to create the child's pathology. And that's what's going to take the child out of the middle. And that was the critical piece of the therapy component. Because as long as you have a pathological parent trying to create pathology in the child, you're always having to keep them from creating pathology in the child. What we need to do is get in there and change their motivation to do that so that it's no longer serving the function. It's no longer getting rewarded. It's no longer meeting their needs to create pathology in the child, and then they'll stop doing it. Okay. And so that's the critical piece of the solution of the treatment focus. And so that's what I did with the contingent visitation schedule here. So the in these families, in the family courts, so here's the analysis of the families. The child's symptoms of rejecting a parent, that's the attachment pathology. The child's symptoms of an induced attachment pathology confers power to the allied parent regarding the custody decisions of the court and allows them to express their spousal revenge motivations towards the other parent. So they're getting rewarded for it. It gives them power to alter or influence the judge, independent of anything else. The child's symptoms, induced symptoms, are manipulating the court's decisions on custody, and they're getting revenge on the ex-spouse for the divorce and stuff. And so there's a lot of motivations for the pathological parent to create the pathology. And so the function served by the child's symptoms of the rejecting the parent, the attachment pathology, it serves the functions of providing these rewards to the allied parent in manipulating the court's decision, because it works. If you create the pathology in the child, and you get full custody of the child currently in the family courts, because the system is so dysfunctional. And so it's getting rewarded producing pathology in the child from the court's decisions. And then it also satisfies, the function is it satisfies the revenge motivations of the pathological parent. So until we address those power dynamics, and until we address the function that is being served by, and the rewards that are being given to the pathological parent for creating pathology in their child, then we're not going to get a handle on the pathology in the family. This is a motivational pathology, and so we got to get into the motivational zone. So, the design of the contingent visitation schedule, from a strategic family systems perspective, so the contingent visitation schedule will alter how the child's symptoms of rejecting a parent confers power within the family. So as you look in the next, as I described the model or the intervention, you watch how it's changing the power dynamic about the child's symptoms or surrounding the child's symptoms. When the child's symptoms increase based on an outcome measure, so we'll be monitoring the child's symptoms, and when they go up, the time with the allied pathological parent goes down, and the time with the normal range parent, targeted parent, goes up. And then when the child is non-symptomatic and their normal range, then the court-ordered custody schedule is in place. Generally, I would think 50-50. Okay, so if we just start with like the baseline of 50-50, the court says both parents, then when we'll get daily ratings from the targeted parent on affection, cooperation, social involvement sent to the therapist. And when is a child staying normal range, then the court's custody schedule 50-50 stays out. If the child drops to ones and twos and becomes symptomatic, then we decrease the time with the pathological parent and increase the amount of time with the targeted parent to fix the problems in that relationship. They're a normal range parent. And that's the important piece. We need to get the diagnosis on the child's psychological abuse to put this into place. If you don't have a child abuse diagnosis, you're in trouble because you're misdiagnosed the pathology. And so if we're going to restore with the targeted normal range parent, we have to be reassured that that's a normal range parent. And if we got allegations of abuse or even by implication, we have to consider those and rule those out. But then we have a shared persecutory delusion, a factitious disorder, and that would be the justification that child psychological abuse, shared delusional disorder, factitious disorder imposed on another. That's what the contingent visitation schedule is designed to treat. It's not designed to treat ADHD. It's not designed to treat depression. It's designed to treat a shared persecutory delusion and factitious attachment pathology being imposed on the child by a narcissistic, borderline dark personality parent. Now, it's helpful to know all that other stuff. What the diagnosis that's needed, though, is child psychological abuse. We have to be clear that the pathological allied parent, that their parenting is up to the psychological abuse range, because we're going to explain that to a certain degree to the child. We're going to say the reason we're doing this is because we feel like the parenting of mom or dad there is problematic, and sufficiently problematic that we have a child protection issue involved. And they say, no, 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 that's not true. I love them. And they say, all right, that's very interesting, but that's our judgment, is that we need to protect you in this situation. We need to get you out of the middle. So this is all going to be designed to get you out of the middle, and parent stuff is spouse stuff and that stuff, and you should just go back to being a kid. So that's what we're going to be doing on this, and we'd like your cooperation and help making that happen, getting this family back to a normal range family. So we'll be telling that to the child, but we need to get that psychological child abuse diagnosis on our back end so that we know what we're treating. Treatment for cancer is different than the treatment for diabetes. So we got to get clarity on what the pathology is in the family courts. It's child abuse and it's spousal abuse, using the child as a weapon. So the behavioral component of the program is that the contingent visitation schedule is very rule bound. So it's very structured, because if we're asking the court to relinquish some of its authority on custody, it's the courts decide custody. And if we're asking them to give some of that authority over to the Treatment provider, the family therapist, or GAL could do it, but it really should be done within the family therapy context. But if you're going to give some of that authorization over, then we need to reassure the court exactly how that custody schedule is changing based on the child's symptoms, so that the court can say, yes, we're ordering this type of custody schedule that has a little flex component, allowing um, for changes in timeshare based on symptoms of the child. Uh, and, and it's very data driven. That's the other element of the behavioral program. Behavioral psychology is very data driven. So that's where we need to get, because we need to get solutions. We need to document that we're getting solutions. So the contingent visitation schedule is rule bound and structured in triggering its various phases based on the child's symptoms that are based on an outcome measure. We need to get outcome measures into the family courts. The outcome measure is daily ratings of the child on 3 items on a 7-point Likert scale. One and two are awful, 6 and 7 is wonderful, 3, 4, 5's in the normal range. And the 3 items are affection. These are ratings from the targeted parent during the child's time with that parent. So ratings on affection, those are the attachment networks we're monitoring with that one. Cooperation, those are the child's emotional regulation networks we're monitoring with that one. And social involvement, mood and arousal. And that's the brain networks we're monitoring with that symptom feature. Now, those 3 symptoms, affection, cooperation, and social involvement, I chose those 3 specifically because those are the symptoms that are going to be, or the features, behaviors, relationship behaviors that are going to be impacted by child psychological abuse. And so, if we're dealing with physical abuse and we protectively separate the child from the abusive parent and recover the child's healthy development, then we restore contact with the physically abusive parent, we're going to put safeguards in place, like maybe some supervised visitation, maybe make sure they get into some therapy and develop some insight on before we just return the child to a parent who's documented physically abusive. And one of the things we will monitor for, in addition, is a return of bruises or symptoms of physical abuse, serious acting out or something from the child that indicates that the um, physical abuse is resumed. Well, for psychological abuse, we want to do the same thing. We want to, when we restore contact with the abusive parent, we want to, or anytime we have contact with a documented abusive parent, we want to monitor the child's symptoms to make sure that the abuse isn't happening. And for psychological child abuse, the symptoms we will want to monitor are attachment, emotional regulation, and social involvement over with the parents. So, affection, cooperation, social involvement. We just want to make sure those stay in normal range 3, 4, 5. We don't need them 6 or 7. Wonderful time, if occasionally goes, but we just need a normal range 3, 4, 5. We want a normal range kid. We actually don't want a kid who's 6 and 7s all the time. We want a normal kid, not a superior kid. That would indicate issues as well. But it's okay if your kid drops to 1 and 2 from time to time. Kids act up. We get family conflicts. That's okay. We fix them. It's the prolonged down at 1 and 2 on affection, cooperate. That's indicating there's something happening. And either we got some problem, a 2-person conflict, that's going on, or we got a 3-person triangle. And so we have to figure that out and make sure we get an accurate diagnosis on that. So that's the behavioral structure. Is we're going to be collecting symptoms, just like a kid in school, getting out of his chair or something, you need to stay in your chair kind of stuff. So we're going to be collecting the symptoms and monitoring things and putting in an Excel file so the court can see it, everybody can see it. And then we're going to trigger the various phases based on whether the child's normal range or symptomatic. So the actual structure here, the definitions. So we start like with a behavioral program. We start with the definitions for what is the various criteria for various features of the program. So a successful day is defined as obtaining ratings of 4 or higher on all three scales: affection, cooperation, and social involvement. Now, let me take a second to just talk about that because I'm developing this, you know, intervention. And at the time, I'm thinking, well, what should I make the criteria be? Should I make it be 3 or should I make it be 4? A successful day is 4 or higher or 3 or higher. I would consider 3 a normal range, 3 or higher, and 1 or 2 are problematic. 6 and 7 is wonderful, and 3, 4, 5 is normal range. But I was thinking about where do I set that, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go for the middle criteria of 4. It's just 4. It's just normal range. And if I'm setting a criteria, I'm not going to give it's normal 4. Um, 5, 6, 7 above, 1, 2, 3 below. It's right in the middle. So a successful day is being middle or above. Now, if you want to negotiate that with the child, that's fine. You drop it to a 3 or better, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with negotiating some of the features out. The important thing is the structure of the program, and any good behavioral psychologist will be able to do this. We'll be able to understand it and get it. We need a criteria for a successful day, 3, 4, something like that, because it's not really a. It is about the successful day as the ground, but it's really about the successful week that we're looking at. And a successful week is defined as 5 or more successful days in a 7-day period. So we're not asking the child to be great all 7 days. So let's for ease of understanding, let's take a week on, week off schedule, let's say. So 7 days, 50-50, week on, week off. So in the week with the targeted parent, we're not asking to get 7 out of 7 days to be 6. No, 5 out of 7. You can have a couple of days where you're down to 1s and 2s and you're having some problems. Yeah, that's fine. But basically, 5 out of the 7 days, you're 4 or higher on this, or 3 or higher on the rating scale. That would be a successful week. If you're down though 4 or less out of 7 days, 3 successful days out of 7 or something, that's not a successful week. Okay, we got problems that are still going on. And because we're confident that the targeted parent is a normal range parent, that there's not an abuse situation with that parent, so we're confident this is normal range kind of stuff, maybe, or triangulated stuff, then we deal with it in therapy, but we're going to need more time to work it out because obviously there's some problem in that relationship. And so that's what the therapy then, the weekly family therapy focuses on, those ratings and negotiating out what those are. So it gets us off of the pull to the past where we're talking about past grievances and stuff. No, the past is gone. I can't do anything about the past. We got ratings this week about things that happened this week. Those are real things. That's behavioral psychology, stimulus response. We're coming back into the now, the present moment that we can do something about, not the past that we can't do anything about. That's a symptom of trauma pathology. It pulls a focus on the past. We can't solve the past because the past that needs to be solved is with the pathological allied parent. It's their childhood trauma that's driving the whole thing. We can't solve that. And so we got to get away from that pull on the past, move to the current situation. What's happening this week, this Tuesday in this family? Tell me what's going on. And it's applied behavioral analysis. You go through behavior chain interviewing, it's called, where you just say, okay, what did you do? And then how did you respond? And how did you respond? And how did you respond? And you just work out the behavior chain and the cues and everything. And then you negotiate out, what was that, a rating of a 2, or is that a rating of a 3, or what's normal range? What's not normal range? What are the expectations in the family? That's the family therapy part. And so all we're asking from the child is that their normal range, 3, 4, 5 on affection, cooperation, social involvement. An unsuccessful week is when there's less than 5 of the 7 days. And when there's an unsuccessful week, we then trigger the short-term contingent response. And here's the intervention. So if they've had an unsuccessful week, boom, we trigger. So The successful day is the unit that we're measuring, that we build on to get a successful week, sort of consistency that we're just looking for normal range. If we get an unsuccessful week, that's your symptom, then we trigger into the intervention. And the intervention for an unsuccessful week is a short term adjustment to the custody timeshare schedule based on daily symptoms. So if the child is unsuccessful that week, then the child doesn't transfer custody over to the other parent until they show 3 consecutive successful days, at which point the court's custody schedule, whatever the court ordered, 50-50 likely, will come back into place with no makeup days. So any days that are lost are simply days that are lost. And so what's happening here is if you set a criteria for what constitutes a successful week, if the child doesn't meet that criteria for successful week, then they're going to stay with the targeted normal range targeted parent until they get until we get a handle on it. And the definition of getting a handle on it is 3 consecutive successful days. The moment they get 3 consecutive successful days, we say, okay, good. Whatever problems we were having are resolved. Now we go back to the court ordered visitation schedule. So it's very structured in how it does it. And these rules are negotiable to a degree. But if you negotiate them away, you're going to destroy the program. But whether it's a 3 or a 4 on the rating scale, I might even go to 4 to 5 days, 4 days. I'm not going to go less than 4 days, but I might go 4 days if I have a particularly problematic child or something. I don't know. I'm going to negotiate it out with the family and the targeted parent and the child. Some of the structures. And children respond very well to these programs. Okay, if you give them rules for how to do things, they kind of play with it. They like it. And what this does is it takes the child out of the middle. It gives them a reason to tell their pathological parent why they're bonding to the targeted parent. I have to, otherwise they won't let me see you. Okay. And so it takes the child out of the middle, out of that loyalty conflict, because prior to this, the current situation, the child is being loyal to the pathological parent by rejecting the targeted parent. Now, by adjusting the schedule this way, the child will be showing loyalty to the pathological parent by bonding to the targeted parent. Because if the child is symptomatic and rejects that parent, the child's not going to be with the pathological parent. And so that we're taking the child out of the middle of the situation by doing this. The other thing that is important about doing this is that we are right now, the child's induced attachment pathology is making an implied allegation that the targeted parent, the normal range targeted parent, is somehow a problem parent and abusing the child. Well, this will entirely reverse the meaning of the child's symptoms. If the child develops severe attachment pathology, we're no longer attributing that to the targeted parent. We're attributing it to the pathological parenting of the allied parent. We're saying you are abusing the child again. Not that the targeted parent is, that's how it gets framed right now. Oh, the targeted parent must be abusing the child in some way to create the pathology. That's where the importance of the diagnosis comes in. We need to be clear and confident in our diagnosis of the child's psychological abuse, because when we see the child's symptoms, we're going to attribute it to the psychological abuse of the allied parent that's diagnosed. And so now that's no longer serving the needs of the pathological parent to get the blame on the other parent for being abusive and their revenge motivations and all of the spousal abuse component. It's no longer working anymore, because now instead of making the accusation it's making the accusation against the allied parent. You're the abusive parent when the child becomes symptomatic. And they say, no, I'm not. I'm not. Yes, you are. I tell the child, I don't care. You're abusing the child because I'm seeing the symptoms. Okay, so I just deal with all their manipulations and stuff. Oh, it's not me, it's the child, and then like all this kind of stuff. No, I'm clear on my diagnosis. It's child psychological abuse because I'm clear on what the shared persecutory delusion, and that's my diagnosis. And so, and so that it takes away the motivation of revenge and just a lot of the psychological stuff. I'm not the inadequate spouse, parent. You are the inadequate parent, spouse. I'm not the rejected one in the marriage. You're the rejected one. And all these psychological stuff in the personality disorder. It's taken all that away. And it's blaming them, shaming them, publicly you're abusing your child. And they go, ah. And so it's altering their motivations on that. In addition, for like the borderline spectrum who are really intense and about abandonment and separation from the child, if they produce pathology in the child, they see their child less. Oh my goodness, no, 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 no. And so again, it takes away the motivation for them to produce pathology in the child because they get to see the child less, not more. And so we're reversing how it confers power, it, and then in the custody schedule and how it's meeting their secondary needs, how it's rewarding them for producing pathology in the child. No, not getting rewarded anymore. In fact, it's reversing that whole process. And in doing that, you take away the parent's motivation, and then that takes a child out of the middle. We don't have to be worrying about this. Then there's also a level where I define what a serious breach, if there's a serious breach. So if the child evidences a serious breach, such as runaway or violent behavior, then there's a long-term consequence. The child remains in the custody care of the normal range targeted parent for 2 weeks, with 3 consecutive successful days needed to resume court-ordered custody visitation schedule. And so basically, as you see, and again, there's nothing magical about the rules and stuff. You can drop to a week or something. But the important thing is you define the criteria for the program, and any behavioral therapist, any good applied behavioral analysis can do this. Dialectic behavior therapists should know applied behavioral analysis. That's the behavior part of DBT, dialectic behavior therapy. So any DBT trained therapist should be able to understand applied behavioral analysis and apply that, and you work it out. And on the structure of things, the in addition now to just talk about the booklet for a second. So back when I was doing this, so I wrote Foundations in 2015. Um, you know, so I wrote Foundations in 2015, and then I wrote these booklets in 2016 because I knew I was going to need them. And so I developed the diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting. The 3 symptoms will 100% identify when the pathology is present. 12 associated clinical signs, beautiful, wonderful little symptom features that can also support the diagnosis. And the parent-child relationship rating scale as an outcome measure, produce data about that period of time, generating all the tools of clinical psychology that I'm going to need to fix the pathology in the family. And back then, I published them up on Amazon, make them available to everybody out there, because I don't want to be withholding interventions that could be solving your situation. But I knew that these weren't ready yet, because the context, the mindset of the professional psychology people wasn't in a place where they're looking for solutions. They don't want solutions. They're not actively motivated to solve anything. It's financial. It's a variety of reasons why the mental health professionals in the family courts are so abysmal, but they are. Okay, so there's no motivation in any of the forensic psychology people to solve it, or in the clinical psychology people to solve it. And so as long as there's no motivation, lead a horse to water, nothing's going to happen. But I knew I was going to need these down the road. So I wrote them up and made them available, broadly available. The Contingent Visitation Schedule, though, as I was because I wanted to keep both of these around 50 pages. So brief booklets, both of these you can give out to your mental health person, or the court, and say, I want this kind of assessment, please, and I would like this kind of remedy. And you give them out. And as now the contingent visitation schedule, describing it, you just heard me describe it, it's pretty simple. So it's like 10 pages of the booklet or something, and I've got 40 pages to put around it either side. So I took the opportunity in the first part to just go through some of the description of the pathology, since I figure this might be going into the court for the court to read, because we're asking the court to authorize an adjustment in the custody schedule contingently upon the child's symptoms. So if we're going to ask the court to authorize that, we should explain to the court what they're authorizing. So that's what I wrote the booklet for. So if it's going into the court and the judge is going to read this, I should explain what the pathology is we're talking about with the judge. So I took the opportunity to do that. Same thing over here with this one. If we're saying, Your Honor, we'd like this kind of assessment, for a clinical diagnostic assessment, then we should tell the judge what the assessment entails. But in doing that, I can tell the judge a little bit about what the pathology is that we're worried about. And so educate the court system at the same time. And once you know family systems and cross-generational coalition stuff, you don't forget it for the next case. Once you see, you're always going to see. Once you see a persecutory delusion, you're going to see it in the next case, and the next case, and the next case. And so you say, how do we develop, judicial curriculum? Well, here it is. You put these in the hands of the judges, and narcissistic parent. There's the other one. The narcissistic parent. Put these in the hands of the legal profession. These are your judicial education approach. You don't need classes and coursework. So I took that opportunity with the contingent visitation schedule. And so just to run down kind of what I talked about here, I start by opening up, talking just about the attachment pathology, reframing this over and this is a problem in the love and bonding system. It's an attachment pathology. And then I talk about the flawed construct of parental alienation. We need to get away from that. Everybody stop using the construct of parental alienation. Stop it, stop it, stop it. There's no such thing. It's a shared persecutory delusion, psychological control. It's it's a cross-generational coalition. It's a variety of real things. It's child psychological abuse. It's a variety of real things. Stop using this made-up euphemism. And so we can use professional terms and deal with it at a professional level. And then I describe an attachment-based model. I describe the application of knowledge. There's no new theory. It's just the application of knowledge. And when we do that, there's 3 diagnostic indicators that will always be present with the pathology, and describe the diagnostic checklist. Then I describe a family systems description, cross-generational coalition. The family's transitioning from an intact family structure to a separated family structure, and it's collapsing into a cross-generational coalition. It's described by Mnuchin, and that's what we're worried about here. Then I have a little section on describing psychological control. And let me take a second to just touch on that. If you want to use a word other than parental alienation, use psychological control or brainwashing. Don't use brainwash. Use psychological control. Barber. Okay, you got all sorts of quotes. You got all sorts of research for psychological control. Stop using parental. I'm worried about the psychological control of my child. Creating a emotional cutoff in my relationship with them, or creating a problem in the attachment bond to them. Find different ways to say that without using made-up pathology, because using a euphemism like parental alienation hides and covers the fact that it's child psychological abuse. And we need the child psychological abuse diagnosis for the clarity for our treatment. Diagnosis guides treatment. And if we don't get the diagnosis of child psychological abuse, our treatment is not going to be effective. No treatment of mine for child abuse is going to be effective as long as I'm sending the kid home to be abused by the parent. Okay, so if I've got a physically abused kid and I send the kid home to be physically abused, my treatment's not going to work. Sexually abused kid, I send the kid home to be sexually abused, my treatment's not going to work. Psychological abuse, same thing. We need the diagnosis so we can act with the clarity. So start using established knowledge, and stop making stuff up. That's why we got in so much trouble everywhere. Forensic psychologists with their custody evaluations, stop making things up. We need a diagnosis. So psychological control. Then I talk about the assessment and diagnosis. I tell them, this is the type of assessment you need, and we're gonna need a diagnosis to guide our treatment. Then I talk about the 3 diagnostic indicators and 12 associated clinical signs. So I talk about the 12 ACS. And so if you give them this, they're going to learn about the 12 ACS, and we should be routinely doing the diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting. Routinely. There is absolutely no reason for these mental health people not to complete a diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting. I don't care if they agree with me, disagree. I don't care. It really doesn't matter. Just check, 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 check. Just tell us what the symptoms are. The idea that they are withholding symptom information from parents in the court is phenomenally low practice. Holy Toledo. Imagine a doctor, and you were worried about cancer with the child. And we say, doctor, does this child have cancer? And the doctor says, I'm not going to tell you. He said, well, will you get these test results? And the doctor says, no, I'm not even going to order the testing for cancer. You're a doctor. What are you talking about? Geez Louise, tell us what the symptoms are. That's the diagnostic checklist. Boom, boom, boom. I don't care whether you agree, disagree, whatever. Parenting practices rating scale. Tell us what the targeted parent, where you evaluate their parenting to be. Tell us. But they say no. They just say, no, I'm not going to tell you what the symptoms are. I'm not going to diagnose the pathology. Nope, not going to do it. And they get away with it. Where is the oversight for these mental health people? Why does the court accept this low quality of people that won't even tell you what their symptoms are? And we should be routinely collecting the diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting, 12 associated clinical signs, and the parenting practices rating scale routinely every single time, just to document for everybody, for both litigants and for the court, what the symptoms are. We got one litigant asking for it. So mental health people, we got a litigant asking for this documentation. Please provide it. That's your obligation as a mental health professional. It's so frustrating. These people are so bad. So bad. And then I discussed that the diagnosis we're concerned about is child psychological abuse. So we're in abuse pathology, one way or the other. That's the only cause of severe attachment pathology is child abuse by the targeted parent some way and creating the child's attachment pathology towards that parent, or psychological child abuse by the allied parent, creating a shared persecutory. It's going to go one way or the other. And so, Your Honor, we're in child abuse range, and you should be getting some sort of child abuse diagnosis and a protection response from all mental health professionals, one way or the other, on all of these cases. And the fact that you haven't been speaks volumes about the failure of professional psychology and their duty to protect obligations. So in addition, that's not all. I give you more. In addition, I've got a bunch of appendices in the back. And so I'm able to just say, well, what should I give the court? What should I give people? I'm just giving away stuff. And what should I give people that'll help them? So the first section here, I talk about just the research on parental psychological control of children. Let me pull that up for a second. So, I just started this whole section of the appendix because Barber and Harmon, in their book, Psychological Control of Children, list over 30 studies that have validated the construct of parental psychological control of children. So, parents, why aren't you not using that construct? Empirically validated psychological control, Barber. And I got quotes on my website. I've got handouts on psychological control. Why aren't you using this instead of this made up thing called parental alienation that just drives you into disaster and solves nothing. It's just phenomenal to me why you don't use established knowledge. So that was number one. Okay. Appendix true is I gave you the treatment focused assessment protocol. So I basically said, if you want to assess for it, this is the protocol I would recommend you assess for it. So I'm giving you the answers. And then number three is a treatment focused assessment sample report. I even wrote your reports for you. And look how short it is. It's really short. Okay. If three diagnostic indicators are present, that's the pathology. So it's like really short and focused, and you can get a second opinion on it and even a third opinion on it. And it's like $2,500 to produce one of this clinical assessment rather, and it's 4 to 6 weeks. Okay. I've even wrote your report for you. And the next one is a treatment focused report if it's sub-threshold. If you don't have the 3 diagnostic indicators, I wrote you a report about that one too. I'm giving these mental health people information, and I'm telling the court, this is, you can get this from anybody who is competent. And then the next chapter or the next appendix is the diagnostic checklist. Okay, for pathogenic parenting. 3 symptoms, 12 associated clinical signs. Then the next appendix is the parenting practices rating scale. Okay, 4 levels of parenting for the targeted parent. Abusive range, really seriously problematic. Those would be kind of the abusive range parent. Then level 3 is normal range problematic. Level 4 is normal range healthy. So we got 2 levels are normal range, 2 are abusive range. Tell us, please, what the parenting practices of the targeted parent are. Are they the normal range or the abusive range? Tell us, please. And then I wind up with the parenting parent-child relationship rating scale. Okay. And you really don't need a piece of paper on this because it's just 3 symptoms and they're easy. 1 to 7 scale on affection, cooperation, social involvement. 1 and 2 is bad. 3, 4, 5 is normal. 6 and 7 is pretty good. And you just email 3 numbers, not a whole description, just 3 numbers to the family therapist each day. Family therapist gets those numbers in their email, puts them into an Excel file. You come into the weekly therapy session and your family therapist has all those weekly ratings. And if there was a 2 or a 1 on a particular day, they say, hey, what's going on with that? They talk to you talk to your child, negotiate things out, and resolve the situation. Apply behavioral analysis, behavior chain interviewing, and then you can use all sorts of communication skills and stuff, and teach them I statements and problem solving skills and communication skills, and then you can go into emotionally focused therapy and helping them develop attachment communications. And oh my goodness, there's so much you can do. Internal family systems therapy, helping them develop, integration of the various parts. There's so much you can do once you get the family therapy in place. But we got to get the diagnosis guides treatment. This is child psychological abuse. And if you don't get the diagnosis of child psychological abuse, you're going to be spinning your wheels because you'll be treating cancer with insulin. And that's not the treatment for cancer. The treatment for cancer is chemotherapy, maybe even some surgery to get in there and remove some malignancy or something. We gotta get a handle on that. So we're going to need for this for a contingent visitation schedule, we're going to need some organizing family therapists to get the numbers in and to monitor the symptoms and to trigger the short-term shifts around and when those end and all those sorts of. We're going to need somebody to organize that. I recommend it's a family therapist, applied behavioral analysis, DBT. I would recommend DBT therapist. Now, there's a lot of people who say, I know DBT. No, we're looking for a seriously trained DBT therapist. The ones working with borderline personality pathology, the ones who are working as part of a treatment team on DBT, those, okay, the serious Linehan trained DBT therapists is who we're looking for as your top quality clinical person. So we're going to need an organizing family a therapist to receive the daily ratings on the parent-child relationship rating scale and address family relationship problems evidenced in the ratings, and to trigger the short-term contingent visitation response when warranted by the data. Applied behavioral analysis experience. Holy cow, applied behavioral analysis is so common. It's classic behavioral psychology from the 1960s, used all the time in the school system. For the school system uses ABA all the time. Above the age of 5, they use a functional behavioral analysis before the age of 5. In fact, I think IEPs, they require a functional behavioral analysis before any behavior plan can be put in the school system. The Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, mandates a functional behavioral analysis in all school settings before we can put in a behavior change program. So the school system psychology people know functional behavioral analysis, but we can't find someone who knows it in the family courts, or applied behavioral analysis in the family courts. It is so The quality of mental health people we got in the family courts is just exceedingly low. So that's the therapists that were needed. A GAL could trigger this. Okay, so if you got a good GAL on something and you want to make them monitor the symptoms report, but what you're going to miss with the GAL is the family therapy component. And that's critical to treating pathology as therapy. It's just not the schedule. We got to fix the pathology in the family. If you put this in, it's going to remove the parent motivation, the pathological parent's motivation. So you're going to get a quieting of the situation. But we still need that family systems therapist on this case, a competent one. Internal family systems therapy is my recommendation for kind of understanding the family therapy side of things. Internal family systems therapy combines classic family systems with Gestalt therapy. Gestalt therapy is wonderful. I love Gestalt. And so to close here, let me just say to any mental health professional that is out there or that you run across, I provide consultations the first week of every month in my online office on DoxyMe. I'm on the internet here. To look around. There's my office. And so first week of every month, and you can schedule through my consulting website. So if there's a mental health professional who is court ordered or wants to, or on the contingent visitation schedule, or is interested in organizing it and implementing it, I'm available for consultation. Okay, so you can talk to me. And if the court wants to put me on as a consultant to the situation, I'm available. So I'm doing everything I can do as a clinical psychologist to solve the pathology in the family courts. I've given you the diagnosis. I've explained it in detail. I've told you how to assess for it. I've explained it in detail. I've told you how to treat it. I've explained it in detail. I've given you outcome measures. I've given you diagnostic checklists. And I don't know what more I can do for you when there's no motivation in the mental health people to solve it. Now, what the question becomes, what I've exposed with the court pathology is how you don't have any mental health or competent mental health services over here, and the mental health people that are here have zero motivation to solve anything. They're just financially exploiting the families, and that's a fact. So we got one group of psychologists who are merely exploiting these families for money. That's the forensic psychologist. And then we got the other group of psychologists, the clinical psychologists, who have abandoned these families because it's too dangerous to practice in the family courts. So there is no competent mental health services in the family courts, and as a result, there is rampant child abuse and rampant spousal abuse, undiagnosed, untreated, unchecked, and it's been going on for decades. Because of a failed experiment of forensic psychology. So with that, happy Sunday, everybody, and good luck. You know where I am. I'm doing what I can. So we'll talk to you all later. Take care, everybody.